Once again, my name is Rich. I'm the children's and the junior high director here at Faith Family Church, which means I'm essentially, I'm kind of just a big kid. I know I have a lot of familiar faces in here from people who are either serving in JV or graduated out, so awesome, good to see you guys. You thought you could escape. Not this time. Now, to give you guys who don't know me a little bit about who I am, I think I'm a pretty relatable guy. I think I spread out to all the different groups of people. For my primary group is the nerdy people, because I'm like the king of the nerds. I love like superhero stuff. Star Wars is like my jam. I like play way too much Dungeons and Dragons. But for those of you who are sporty, don't worry. I was the junior varsity captain of the bowling team growing up too, so we can relate. We can talk stats and stuff like that. I get what you're going through. But today, if you guys are taking notes, the title of the sermon that I'm going to be giving to you guys today is called "A Heart Attack, 700 Wives, and Taking It a Day at a Time." And if this sounds a little bit weird, you know what? Just get used to it, because it's going to be a weird next 30 minutes. Not 30. I'm just kidding. Probably like 15. If someone wants to time me, keep me to that. That'd be good too. But a heart attack, 700 wives, and taking it a day at a time. Now, once again, some more background on who I am. I grew up here at Faith Family Church. I'm like the classic church kid. Like for me, when I was growing up, I remember when I first said the S word, man, I got in so much trouble. I called this kid stupid, and man, my mom, I was like grounded for forever. So I grew up in church, and I'm pretty much that stereotype entirely. But growing up in church, there's some good things I've seen, and then there's some not so good things that I think I've learned just by myself not understanding how this Christian thing works, even though I grew up in church. Like for instance, I've been on missions trips. I've had friends who have gone on missions trips, and we've seen like the whole people being healed. We've seen blind eyes and like just being healed, and people could see, and people being able to hear for the first time. Like I shook hands with a witch doctor once. That was a really cool experience, and no one told me at the time, and I got kind of freaked out later when I found out. But I've also seen at Love is Reds and at camps, just like you can literally watch people as their whole entire life like changes in an instant, like when they encounter that love from God and they kind of feel like they can finally breathe in for the first time. I've seen that happen. I've seen such crazy things, but even though I've seen all these crazy things, it doesn't mean I've experienced all these crazy things. And growing up in church, I eventually got to the point where, and this isn't necessarily even a long time ago, this is something that I think I still deal with, of that idea of like, why not me? Like, why isn't that happening for me? How come like that person, like their leg snapped back into place and I have a headache and I'm like, God, come on, where are you? Fine, I'll just take Advil. But why am I not seeing the miraculous? Why am I not hearing from God on a daily basis? I read the Bible. I teach the Bible on a daily basis. Why are there still some times where it seems like I'm just missing something? There's just something that I'm missing. And really the main point I'm going to be talking about for the rest of this sermon. So if you guys are taking notes, you can jot this down and kind of try to see if you can figure out where we're going as we go through the rest of this message. But it's that for God to change your life and for him to show up in your life, he really has to have your heart, not your actions, although we'll get to that later, but he has to have specifically your heart. Now, there's a story in the Bible of Jesus interacting with these two sisters. And the two sisters are called Mary and Martha. And this verse is going to be up on the screen for you guys. I want to go through this quick verse to kind of set the foundation for what I think my biggest problem was. So in this story, Jesus comes and he stays at the house of these three siblings, two sisters and a brother. The brother, he's not in the story. Don't worry about him. Forget about him. But the two sisters we're going to focus in on. And this verse says, "And Martha had a sister called Mary. Now Mary was sitting at the Lord's feet, at Jesus' feet, and just listening to his teaching. But Martha was distracted." If you guys, like circling your Bible, or if you're using the Bible app, or if you have like a pen and you want to carve this into your hand, circle the word distracted. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to Jesus and said, "Jesus, don't you even care that my sister is just sitting there while I'm doing all the work? I'm setting the table. I'm cooking the food. I'm washing the dishes. And I'm not getting anything. But Mary's just sitting here talking, listening. Shouldn't I get something too?" In verse 41, Jesus answers and says, "Martha, Martha, 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 you are anxious and troubled and stressed and maybe going a little crazy over all of these things. But one thing is important. There's one thing that's necessary. And Mary has chosen what that is, and it's not going to be taken away from her. Now, in this story, I always get agitated when I read this story because I understand how Martha feels. I'm like, yeah, Jesus, give the girl her answer. Like, she's doing all the work, and this bum's just sitting here getting all the glory. But then today, as I was looking at this verse, man, it really struck a chord with me personally. That phrase, distracted with much serving. Some translations of the Bible say distracted with all the work that had come up. And I think sometimes as Christians, we start our relationship with God with that feeling of freshness, that feeling of peace, that feeling of man, Jesus, just thank you for loving and forgiving me. But then we get distracted with the work that comes up. We start off being a Christian, and then we hear, dude, you gotta change that way that you talk. You can't just be saying the S word to everyone. Or, dude, you gotta stop looking at that stuff. Man, you have to change the friends you hang out with. And even sometimes we ourselves will draw those lines in the sand of this is what I have to be now. And those things are all good. But there's a difference between doing those things and getting distracted by them. I think when we get distracted by those things, they pull us away, and we begin to view God kind of as those old candy machines. I've put my behavior in, and now I'm supposed to get something out. And that's not how it works. If you want to get something from Jesus, if you want to get something from God, don't be rushing around the house trying to fix everything and making your life look perfect. Just sit at Jesus' feet. Just spend actual time with Jesus. Don't work trying to impress him. Spend actual time with him. Now, throughout history, I say history a lot, but I really just mean specifically looking at the history of the Bible. We see Jesus as he walks up to towns, as he walks away from towns. There's these people he shakes his fists in the air at. There's these people he probably gets headaches from. There's these people who he weeps over. And it's not necessarily always the people who just refuse to believe in him. It's the people who kind of just choose to dip their toe in the water and then get distracted, who kind of are in, but not all the way in. And Jesus, time and time again, he cries and he prays over these people. Why? Because I think Jesus understands that it's more dangerous for us to be kind of just wishy-washy in than for us to be all the way out. In the same way with Martha. Martha was busy, she was distracted, and I bet if Jesus hadn't talked to her, she would have run herself ragged and eventually just given up. But she learned in that moment that really what it truly means to follow Jesus is to be fully committed, that when Jesus shows up, that you sit down and you listen, and even that you go out of your way to listen. Now, another image I think of when I think of this is my dad. Now, my dad, he's an old fart, and he'll tell you that. He's old. But I can remember it was a few years ago. My dad's 64, I think. And I'm kind of built like my dad, not crazy big, but we're definitely carrying some extra luggage with us. And my dad, as he's grown up playing basketball, he's grown up being competitive, and he's playing basketball this one night with all of these 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, and he's at this place playing basketball. And to give you some back history on my dad works in construction, so he's a fit guy. He goes out and he works outside all day, he lifts heavy things, he's in decent enough shape, but he also growing up, and also when I was young, we're the kind of family who Doritos, that's a meal, not a side. You could have a whole bag of Doritos and call that dinner while you're watching Netflix. That's just how my family works. We know we're not healthy, but luckily we had a little bit of a wake-up call when my dad's playing basketball with all these 30-somethings, and then he just collapses. And he's laying there, and luckily enough, they had just that week installed a defibrillator in their factory, and they were able to bring him back. And my dad, man, when he went into the hospital and the doctors were explaining what happened, I was kind of intrigued by hearing about what had gone on. If you guys are squeamish like I am, then buckle up, get ready to pucker those cheeks, because it might get a little bit squeamishy. Now my dad's heart, what had happened, if for those of you guys who aren't familiar with how having a heart attack sometimes works, he had a clog in one of his arteries, which means as time goes on, the blood that's supposed to go from the rest of his body to his heart, it has a hard time getting there. Oh, you might start to see where I'm going with the rest of this lesson. It has a hard time getting to into the heart because there's this junk in the way, because the pathway is getting smaller and smaller, because more and more things are starting to take up that space between the rest of the body and the heart. So what eventually ended up happening is all of these different tiny gross veins started to grow around the block to try to make space for the blood to get there. And ultimately what we had is just something that was waiting for the perfect thing to go wrong, so that the life blood of his body couldn't get to his heart. And that kind of reminds me sometimes of my own life. There's a lot of things that, even though I'm doing the busy work of being a Christian, there's a lot of things that sometimes get in the way between me and the heart of God. There's a lot of things that sometimes get in the way between how I'm living and how I'm feeling and what God really wants for me. Now, there's enough going that if everything is going just right, I can just barely get by. But as soon as life gets just a little bit too hard, my life feels like my dad on the floor of that gym in that factory. Now this sounds a little bit like, don't worry, we'll fix it later. Well, let's look at Matthew 13:15 real quick. This is Jesus talking to this group of people who he's weeping over. His heart goes out for the people who have that heart kind of like my dad. There's enough faith going in, but not enough to have that life Jesus really died for. Matthew 13:15 says, the hearts of these people have become fat. They hear very little with their ears. They've closed their eyes. And man, if they did not do this, they would see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts, and then they would be changed in their ways, and I would heal them. Now, obviously, if you guys didn't know, wake up call, Jesus, when he's preaching, Jesus, when he's on the earth, he's not like this white British dude who's got like the greatest manners ever. No, Jesus was like an Arabic man. He had dark skin and he didn't speak English. He spoke a language called, wow, I'm just blanking. He spoke a language called Arabic, but when he's writing, it's being written in a different language called Greek. Now, as he's writing and as we're translating, I think sometimes we lose the meaning of certain words from language to language. So there's two words I want to look at in this verse. The first one is eHomi, not eHarmony, but eHomi. And it's the last word of that verse, the word heal. And it means healed physically, but also healed spiritually. It means to have a healthy soul, a healthy mind, and a healthy body. And that's the healing that Jesus offers. That's the healing that he wants to get to us. But then there's another word, and this word's a great insult if you want to sound really fancy. It's pachuno. Pachuno means closed, fat, and clogged. So feel free to start using that as an insult, and people won't even know what you're saying, and you'll sound really smart and maybe even a little Italian. Pachuno, you be pachuno, what's wrong with you? I'm really weird, I'm sorry. But these two words specifically kind of paint a picture for how I think we sometimes get in the church. We're not necessarily closed off from God. We're open to him doing things in our lives. The problem is that our hearts are clogged. They're full, they're fat, there's a lot going on. Now, this is my next slide. I think sometimes the devil doesn't necessarily want to take you out, and the devil doesn't even necessarily 100% want you to not believe in God. I think sometimes the devil wants to keep you distracted from God. He wants to keep you like Martha, busy with making sure you act in the right way, because you never will. Busy with making sure you're talking the right way, because you'll never be perfect. Busy with making sure that your life looks like a good Christian, because you'll never get there. And all the while, Jesus is right there saying, just come and spend some time with me. I love your not perfect self. Now, this brings me to the next really weird story that every time I told someone today I was teaching on this verse, they kind of looked at me really weird. It's found in 1 Kings 11, 1 through 4. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying in this verse, we see that what this guy is doing is not something that the Bible says people are allowed to do, okay? So don't get mad at me. Don't go over to Austin and Josh and say, that guy's teaching heresy. Okay, let's get into it. Now, King Solomon, one of the wealthiest kings in the Bible, one of the kings who took Israel and made it into the cultural, the social, and the economic powerhouse of its regions. This guy, King Solomon, known for being the smartest guy, the smartest king. People would come from all over just to hear him talk. This is what he did. This is the one thing he did that was probably the stupidest thing ever. Now, King Solomon loved many foreign women, including the daughter of Pharaoh and women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and the Hittites. Now, in the past, the Lord had said to the Israelites, you shouldn't marry people from other nations. If you do, they will cause you to follow their gods. But Solomon fell in love with these women. I mean, he had all the money, right? He's probably smelled very nice. I don't imagine people smelled good back then. So I think that if I was to live back then, I'd have been married already, because come on, I got Axe body spray. That's all I need. But I think Solomon, with all of this wealth that he had, he fell in love with lots of women, and he had 700 wives who were the daughters of leaders from other nations. He had 300 slave women who were like wives to him. His wives, as time went on, caused him to turn away from God. And when Solomon was old, his wives caused him to follow other gods. So he did not follow the Lord completely as his father David did. Now, this verse, like we said, kind of shows Solomon's being an idiot here. You don't have 700 wives and then 3,000 slave people. No, this is not good. But what I do see is a parallel to how we live today. I think instead of being committed to one voice, to one way of living, instead of our heart going out to one thing, I think the American problem is we might not have 700 wives, but we have like a million hobbies and a million things constantly vying for our attention and pulling at us and filling up our lives. I think we want to have a strong relationship with God, but we get so distracted and we get so pulled away. And that brings me to my little illustration that I have here now. Now let's say that this jar is your heart. And you might start off with, kind of a relationship with God, but as time goes on and you start getting more and more full, it starts to slowly push out that relationship with God that you had before. And I think a lot of us, how our lives feel is like we're trying to make this whole, yeah, I have a relationship with God. Everything's good. Yeah, brother, Jesus loves me. And then as soon as something goes wrong, it starts pushing the rest of our lives out. So what does this cause us to do? I think it causes us to go about having a relationship with God and getting right with him again in the wrong way. Now, first off, before I get into how we can fix this problem, let me once again ask you guys a few questions, some introspective questions, if you will. The first one is really ask yourself in your head, take a look at your life. What is it that your heart is full of? I truly believe if you're here tonight, God's in there. Jesus is in there. But what else is in there? Like my dad's heart, what are the things that are clogging your life up? What are the things that are making it hard for you to get God down in there? What is it that your heart is full of? Because what your heart is full of is what you're eventually going to end up becoming. Now, we say here in the United, we say here at Faith Family Church, show me your 5 friends and I'll show you your future. And that's right, because the people you're closest to, you're going to become like them. Here's another thing. Show me the person that you love, the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, and I'll show you what your future looks like, because you become the same person as time goes on. Show me your hobbies, and I'll show you what you'll become. Really, to put it all simply, show me what you love, show me what's in your heart, and you can kind of predict what your future will end up looking like. Now, here's the thing. You guys have probably heard this message before. I know I have. I heard it a lot growing up, that idea of give God your whole heart. And I think when we hear this, we think that means that you can't do anything else but spend time with Jesus. Like we get this idea that me and Josh and Austin and Devin, what we're trying to get you guys to do is to wake up and it's just Bible from morning to dawn, and then maybe a little bit of worship mixed in between. And when you go to school, you better stand up on your lunch table and make yourself a custom, Jesus loves you, but also maybe kind of hates you, and get your life together signs and totally mess your whole life up, because the only thing you can do is have a relationship with God. And that's not it. That is not, I think, the message of the Bible. I think the message of the Bible is that God should be first and then everything else. God should be what you love most and then all those other things. And I know some of you guys are like, man, this guy's getting away really easy with saying stuff that sounds really simple. But I think we as Christians, sometimes we like the complicated stuff and we neglect the simple stuff, the Mary Martha problem, and our lives look hectic because of it. Jesus first, God first, and then everything else. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that Jesus wants you to be like, I'm gonna be single till I'm 30, no dating, my body's a temple, and I'll tell you what, it's well guarded. No. I think it means that God wants you to be in a relationship. He wants you to have a healthy relationship. Look, the first two people he made, they were in a relationship, and he told them, be fruitful and multiply. Like, Jesus wants you to have a relationship with someone, but he doesn't want it to clog you up and to cause you to get full. He doesn't want it to pull you away from God. It's not, I'm gonna be that weird guy who whenever everyone's hanging out and playing Call of Duty, I bring my Bible and I quote it to them over Xbox Live. No. It's not don't have friends. It's make sure that you have friends who are pulling you closer to God. In so many ways, I think we need to realize that it's really possible for us to have God be involved in everything that we do, and for us to have health because of that. Man, this might sound really weird, but growing up in church, there's some times where I've had more life-giving moments where I felt like God's speaking to me in moments where I'm rolling D20s over a game of Dungeons and Dragons than I've had listening to a podcast. Why? Because my heart's not in it. Because I'm doing the podcast because I have to. I'm doing the podcast because I gotta keep busy for Jesus. And my heart's closed off. Whereas in that moment of me playing that board game, me playing that video game, me walking around the park, I took the time to say, God, can you show me something in this? Can I listen to you while I'm doing this? I think that's what we need to do as Christians. Really, the point I'm trying to say is that giving God your whole heart, it starts with the little decisions. It starts with the day by day, little by little, almost seems like it's not that big of a deal decisions. And I think sometimes we don't want that to be the case. We want our relationship with God to be the moments where it's like, love is red and Jesus, take it all. It's all for you, tears. Oh, I'm so changed. And then Monday happens and I'm so not changed. Why? Big decision. Big emotional decision that doesn't carry on into the rest of our lives. I love these moments. I'm a very emotional person. I love those moments where God shows up. Ooh, I almost fell over. Like I said, sports, very athletic. I love those moments where God shows up and changes our lives. But those big decisions, if not followed up with the little daily decisions, they don't amount to much. So here's my encouraging thing for you guys. It doesn't have to all change in an instant. Just take it one day and one decision at a time. When you're hanging out with your friends, don't be like, gotta cut them all off. They're all unhealthy. But ask God next time you're hanging out with your friends, is this right, God? Do I do less of this, more of this? Is there something I can be doing here? Don't quit all your hobbies. Invite God to be a part of them. Now, I'm not saying like, when you're playing Call of Duty, you're like, Jesus, do you want to sit here? Do you want this next game? Don't get weird with it, guys. I'm trying to make the point that like we can be weird people, but God doesn't have to be weird. Following him doesn't have to be. Just start realizing that you don't want God pushed out of your lives because of the other things you're doing. Instead, just slowly, day by day, say, God, how can I make a little bit more room for you to be involved in what I'm doing? Because if not, you'll get that Martha dilemma where you're trying to fix everything at once and you'll forget that God's trying to do something. If Nick's here, Nick can come on down and we'll get ready to transition out of here. Now, the number one way for us realizing that the most applicable thing we can do to start making those little decisions daily is the simple thing that I'm really bad at because I'm a very scatterbrained person. Big surprise. If you want God to show up and to have more room in your heart, this is how you do it. My final slide. If you make room in your schedule, you'll be making room in your heart. I mean, just think about the last time you were like puppy dog in love with someone. Your schedule became very open. Oh, hey guys, I know I was supposed to come hang out, but like was hanging out with the girl, so... And everyone understands because they know that's important to you. Think of the last time, I have a friend who Fortnite season 5 is coming out on Thursday, and we're trying to get together and hang out, and he's like, actually I can't make it because Fortnite season 5 comes out that day. He has no shame, he'll say it, he knows what's important to him. In the same way, if you want more of God in your heart, if you want to see more of these things that we know God can do for us, take a look at your schedule and ask yourself, can I make more time for God in it? If it's your devotions and you're bad at them, you know what, honestly, church guy here, I'm bad at them too. I'm so bad at waking up in the morning. But I know it's important to me, so I'll do it. I have my coffee ready to go off at 7:30 so that at 7:35, I will smell the coffee and really start to wrestle with how comfortable my bed is. And then eventually I'll get myself there and I'll start reading at 8. If you want to hear more of God's voice when you pray, well, how much are you praying? And when you pray, is it like everything's going on and you're like, hey God, can you speak to me? Okay, no, I'm busy too. Carve out time in your schedule and you'll be carving out space in your heart as well.